Oh, Chaos called. Let's talk to Chaos in the UK.
All right. Welcome, Chaos.
Chaos, hi.
Hi guys.
Hey, what did you want to talk
Yeah.
about today? Or actually, no, I'm sorry. I need. We've started reading it. It says you want to talk about arguments for and against anti-natalism.
Yeah. So, if there's someone in the audience who isn't familiar with that, it is the idea that for a given fetus, it is, depending on the exact argument, either more likely or certain that it would be better to terminate a given fetus for an abortion to occur than it to be born.
I mean, I feel like that's definitely one direction you could take it, but I don't know if that would be considered the definition of antinatalism, at least not to my understanding.
Yeah,
Okay.
the way that it was described to me was that it was described to me as the view that having a child is unethical, and the unethical piece of it would be that that child would be able to experience suffering, and there's the view that suffering, the suffering had isn't worth that life, and so we're kind of creating something that's going to experience suffering that never had the choice about whether or not it was going to opt into that.
Right. And
That's
of
kind of how
course,
that was explained to me.
yeah.
I think it was. I think I was trying to get at that. I just phrased it weirdly.
Okay.
That children shouldn't be born effectively.
Right.
Effectively, the outcome is children shouldn't be born.
Yeah, I think that's a more general and accurate term. So arguments for and against. What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts are that while I find there to be interesting arguments for, I think the argument against would be because when you're getting into ethics, obviously you've got various different like utilitarianism and consequentialism and things.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think that there are some interesting and potentially even compelling cases for children not being had in certain circumstances, or for individual circumstances. Sorry. I think at a systemic level, if it was broadly applied, it wouldn't function.
No, in fact, it would only function to further make, I think our most vulnerable populations would be the one who would suffer way more, and it would not be great.
Yeah, I mean, as with most philosophical concepts, there's the practical implications and then the impractical ones if you take it to the extreme. Skepticism is one example of that, right? You can be a skeptic and find value in skepticism, but if you look strictly at the philosophical discipline and take it to its extreme in this pure form, it becomes untenable, just like any other one. So I think that's the same with antinatalism. I think in certain circumstances, facing human extinction, facing mounting environmental concerns or world wars, all of these things might make some people, hesitant to bring more life into the world, and that is a valid viewpoint for them. But I think once we make broad scale decrees about what is and is not correct, we get into
ethical.
trouble.
I kind of find that it's for me it's kind of a paradox, because I find that someone who would put the time into thinking about the well-being of a child that they're going to have, and who would say, I would want to raise a child in the best possible world that I can, and if I need to wait or whatever the case is, so that I can make sure that the child I'm raising is going to have the best shot possible and what I want to give them. That's the kind of person I want to be a parent, and so I'm frustrated that the people who would give that consideration are the ones who aren't having kids, and obviously that's only in circumstances when that would be, taken into account. But yeah, it's kind of frustrating. The people who care that much, I would really want to see them in that role, but
Yeah. Chaos. One thing that I do think is worth bringing up is that I feel like this issue has become kind of cartoonishly stereotyped to the point where a lot of people just kind of poo-poo it, like, oh, poof, that's stupid. Who would agree with that? And in certain circumstances, if you're presenting it as no one should ever have kids ever, then yeah, that's not tenable, right? That's not going to happen. That's not something we should be pushing for. But being conscious of the fact that you are essentially bringing a life into the world against, like, without consent, and therefore inflicting harm in some circumstances upon a new entity that otherwise wouldn't have had to deal with it and had no say in the matter. If you take that to its conclusion, you come across, anti-natalism. So
yeah. I think that I think that at some point in the future, if we ever get to the point where we're ready to explore space and you have a generation ship where generations are going to be born on the ship and die on the ship, I think I would take a pretty strong anti-natalist approach there, because I think that would be really, really awful to do to living people. Guess what? You were born in a tin tube and you're going to die in the same tin tube.
Tell that to Naomi Wildman, though.
Oh, it's...
Chaos, what are your thoughts here?
So my thoughts are that, I personally probably don't want to have kids on kind of anti-natalist grounds. So my genetics are pretty poor. So for me, having a kid in the biological sense is something that I know would in fact cause a significant amount of harm.
Right.
As compared to an alternate option like
adopting
an LGBTQ kid or something.
Sure.
Something where I know I can cause a positive effect instead of a negative one. And I think that level of addressing it is good, but when it's looked at the scale of, for any given consideration of should a child be born here, if you're looking at it and going from, for argument's sake, a utilitarian standpoint, is this person's life likely to have more suffering than not?
Yeah, and there's a...
Then...
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that if you look at it through that lens, that can be a good way to look at it. But I think that the other thing about that is that rather than looking at the circumstances as they are and going, is there a reasonable adjustment that could be made that would permit for this child to be born without there being incredible suffering or whatever, then I think that is something that gets overlooked quite often in these conversations, because otherwise you get a lot of people who do take anti-natalist positions saying, in general, LGBT plus people shouldn't have kids because their kids will face discrimination and that can cause more harm than good.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of where I do want to draw a line very firmly. I feel that my family history health-wise has not been the best either, and so I would have to think long and hard before passing all of that on. But as always, we want to focus on autonomy here, right? And that should be the goal. So the second that we say, because of your genetics, you should not have children for anybody other than ourselves based on our own moral stance, we get into some really sticky situations very fast.
That is 1 degree away from eugenics.
It is eugenics.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's the justification that
right.
So really awful.
Definitely I agree with you, and on a personal level, I empathize very much with the reasoning there. But as always, we cannot tell other people what to do. And if any of these philosophical concepts spill into actually taking action against others, we get into like a Gattaca situation, which is not great.
But pragmatically, I think we do have a solution. I think that if someone is wondering about whether or not they're wanting, to raise a child, and they're wondering about whether or not they want to biologically have that child, hey, there are a lot of kids who need families.
Exactly.
You know, I think that, quickly just moving over into those people who are already born, the number of kids who would love to be raised by a loving parent, sufficiently pragmatically for me solves that until such time that that's not the issue. But yeah, that's kind of where I got to tell you, Chaos. You got to call in and talk about anti-natalism while my parents are visiting and watching is real weird. It's real weird. I feel awkward.
This is fair. I didn't know that would be happening. Otherwise, I would have picked a different one.
No, that's okay. There's another caller in the queue who wants to talk about this kind of thing as well. So it seems to be that is going to be the day.
It's the parenting episode.
But we do have others. But Chaos, thank you so much for calling. It's always fun talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been good to chat with you guys. I think if I was to make one last remark, it would pretty much just be that I think another interesting result of applying anti-natalism like globally would effectively mean that only rich people have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a weird thing to think about.
Oh yeah, and there's definitely been enough sci-fi around that to make that.
There is one more thing really quick. I saw that in the live chat we did have an anti-natalist who said that their position is motivated not by any of the things that we brought up, but by the idea that humanity is damaging this planet and that by having less kids, we would be leaving a lower carbon footprint. And that's the position that I saw outlined in the live chat. So because I'm not an anti-natalist, because Chaos, it doesn't seem like you're strictly an anti-natalist, I do want to make sure that we're representing the view as clearly as possible, because we don't ever want to straw man a position, especially when that person, those people aren't in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a local anti-natalist, if you will. I would apply it to myself, but I don't think it can be applied more broadly.
Yeah, I think that's a good policy for most philosophical concepts, frankly. But yeah, thank you for calling in, Chaos.
Thank you.
All right, cheers. See you
Take
guys.
care. I feel like we got to workshop local anti-natalist a little bit, though. It just gives me
anybody in my general vicinity should not have children.
Yeah. Like I imagine someone like somebody standing in front of a pediatrician with a sign, pediatrician's office with a sign.
Who would do that? Who would stand in front of a doctor's office and picket? That
would be an argument I would pay to see, to be honest.
Oh my goodness.
It looks like we had a couple of people drop. There might have been an issue with our lines. We do have someone on the line that we're going to take. But look, if you're watching and you wanted to have a conversation with us, if you're a religious caller, today is your day. We always say call in early so we can give you the time that your topics deserve. If you want to call in, 585-526-8774. If you're a religious, if you're a theist caller, you will get priority in the queue. And because we had a bunch of stuff drop off. It's really windy out. That might have been the issue. But we could use the calls.
I'm sorry. In my head, I just pictured them blowing away. It's windy out. That's why we lost callers. They blew away.
In the meantime, it looks like we have someone in the screening room, but